you everyone for joining this morning. We are doing this session on altruism and wellbeing. Obviously, it's a really good time to be talking about things like this because we're obviously the theme of Mental Health Awareness Week, which is concluding now, is kindness. So we wanted to explore the concept of altruism and how it can impact our wellbeing, both in a positive and a negative way. My name's Emily Cook. I am a business psychologist at Thrive, and I've also got Johanna Scheutze with me as well, who's also a business psychologist. Thanks for joining this morning.
Yeah, thank you everyone for joining us today, and especially, I hope you're all having a great Mental Health Awareness Week and had already really nice activities, kindness activities. So really look forward to this webinar.
Yeah. So we're going to take it in turns to present different parts, and we're also going to be monitoring the Q&A and chat function. We're trying to make this session a bit more interactive. So we want you to share your ideas, put them in the chat function. We will try and answer questions as we go as well, but we'll also save some time at the end to answer questions. So we're recording this session like we are with all of them, and you will get a copy of this at the end. So we're going to briefly explore what altruism actually is and think about why it exists. And this is where we would be really interested to hear your views as well. We're then going to kind of go through some of the theories of why it might exist. So I think it's quite interesting to explore these different concepts. And then we're going to look at how altruism can impact well-being. What about if there's too much of it, too little, what kind of effects that can have. And then we'll conclude with talking about how you can really find the right balance. So altruism, by definition, is the act of selflessly giving to others without having any concern for yourself. So that can be anything from giving a seat to a stranger on a bus, or giving a homeless person money, or caring for a sick relative or friend, whatever it might be. And it is all around us. And I think it's something that we all aim to do and strive to do. And I really like this quote here by Ralph Waldo Emerson. So I put that in. I thought that was quite a nice quote to give. But why does it exist? So, I mean, as humans, we are very social species. And in fact, we're probably one of the only species that actually collaborates with others on a really wide scale, even when there's absolutely no relationship. So we're able to collaborate with complete strangers on a regular basis, and that might be one of the main advantages we have. So from that point of view, it makes sense that we would have evolved this altruistic type of behaviour to feel good when we do things for others, even when there's no immediate benefit for ourselves. And it seems that actually being kind to others and caring for others is one of the activities that we find most rewarding and most meaningful. We're going to do a little poll. So I'm going to do this. We've not done this before, so hopefully it works. Okay, brilliant. So we are keen to hear what kind of altruistic acts you guys have done recently. And it could be one of these things, it could be something else, it could be nothing at all. We just want to have a think about what sort of things you've done that have been helpful or altruistic recently. This is interesting. So we've got a lot of people saying they've helped a family member. Actually, quite a lot of people donating time or money to a charity.
Oh, nice.
Helped a stranger. Ah. This is very interesting.
A comment in the chat function: reached out to a friend who's struggling. Oh, that's really nice as well.
That's good. That I think a lot of people will be more mindful of doing stuff like that now, won't they? Because it's, people are going through so many different challenges themselves. It's sometimes hard to, when we're back in our kind of busy normal lives, it's easy to get swept up, isn't it, and forget what's going on around us. But I think certainly this period of time has made us maybe reflect inwards a little bit and think about how it might be impacting other people. So we've got most people have voted, and actually, so 66% of you have helped a family member, About just over half of you have donated time or money to a charity. The least chosen answer was returned a favour as well as something else. So, I mean, I think this goes to show that there is obviously a lot of different things that we might consider as being altruistic. But certainly the most common has been helping a family member, which would make sense. What else? So we've got someone walked 70 miles on my crutches over 14 days to the NHS with my boys' football team. That's fantastic.
That's great, yeah. And there's another one, sorry, helped an elderly gentleman in the supermarket. That's really nice as well, especially like the high-risk group right now. It's nice to support them in any way we can.
Yeah, and donating to charities and helping friends that are having a hard time at the moment. Brilliant. Yeah. Great. Well, that's really good. Thanks for taking part in that. I'll share the results. So that, you can see most of us have helped a family member recently, and I think that's quite common. A lot of you have been donating time or money to a good cause, helped a stranger. Yeah, fantastic. So we're going to explore now some of the theories of altruism, and I'm going to try not to get too technical here because I know theories can be a bit dull, but there are different approaches and different ideas as to why we act altruistically. And I'd also be really keen to hear if you have any suggestions as well. And again, put them in the chat function, because there's loads of different ideas about why we do what we do, so feel free to add your comments. The first one is called kin selection theory, and I think this has been clearly shown in the poll that we've just done. The idea of this is that we're more likely to be altruistic towards people who are in our families or share our genes. So our parents, our siblings, whatever it might be. But we also look at something called reciprocal altruism, and the idea here is that we give to others in order to receive something in the future. So it's kind of that reciprocal idea. But some of you might be familiar with the prisoner's dilemma. I don't know whether anyone's heard of that, but it basically goes like this. So the dilemma is that each individual gains an advantage by betraying the other rather than cooperating with them. And if they cooperate, they all gain something, but it's smaller than the individual reward. But if both prisoners betray each other, then they both lose. So essentially, in the short term, betrayal, or in a wider sense, selfishness, can reap higher rewards for you as an individual, but it's less sustainable over time, which is where the idea of this cooperation or reciprocal altruism comes in. Some people might act altruistically to improve their social status. So an example of this might be a generous charitable donation by an individual that isn't donated anonymously. So that person is likely to gain praise and recognition for their quite seemingly selfless act rather. Another example of this might be the 5 for 5. I did it. You run 5, donate £5 to a charity, and then nominate 5 people, and everyone's posting about it on social media. Why is that? Are we doing that because we want to help others, really, or are we doing that because we feel like other people are doing it and we also want to be recognised for doing it as well? So that's another idea to think of. But then we also have the concept of empathy, and this is probably it explains altruism in a way that these others don't. But empathy is essentially the ability to recognise other people's emotions and then help them. So we are more likely to help someone, I think, if we have empathetic concern for that person or people. And for example, people often give to charities if they've got a personal interest in the cause. Finally, the negative state relief model, and this suggests that we help people in distress because witnessing others' distress makes us feel bad, and helping the other person is usually the best way to get rid of the source. So, for example, if you're walking past a homeless person, for example, and it makes you feel distressed or emotional to see homelessness, you might volunteer at a homeless shelter as a way of kind of alleviating that, because when you then walk past them again, you at least feel like you're giving something back. But our environment and social norms can also influence our altruistic behaviour. So there's a lot of research that has shown that if you model altruistic actions as a parent, it's a really good way of fostering pro-social and compassionate actions in children. So if you're an altruistic parent, your children are likely to model those behaviours. And from a societal perspective, rules, norms and expectations can predict if we act altruistically or not. So for example, the norm of reciprocity is based on social expectation, where we feel the urge to help others if they've done something for us. There's also so many more reasons that we might act altruistically, and I think they would take too long to go through in a lot of detail. We're trying to kind of cover off a few different elements. There's research that has also suggested we're more likely to help children than adults, because we might feel that it's not their fault, whilst adults are more responsible for their own sort of faith. We also might be more likely to help people within our group, like friends, than a stranger or someone who looks different to us, for example. Or the fact that we tend to support maybe one person rather than a group of people. The fact is that most of us want to do good. We really want to be able to help people in need, right wrongs, make a difference. But what stops us is another question. So we might think about things like, how much of a difference will I really make? And all of a sudden, that act of truly and selflessly helping others might end. There's a guy called Peter Singer, who is a philosopher, and he's introduced a concept called, or he really talks about this concept called effective altruism, which is essentially about using the high quality evidence that you have access to and careful reasoning to work out how you can help others as much as possible, but as effectively as possible. This is something that we could talk about for a long time. So rather than doing that, if you are interested in learning more about this, he's got a really good TED talk. So maybe Google Peter Singer Effective Altruism and watch it. It's about 15 minutes long, but it's really thought-provoking. And he puts questions to the audience about, you know, we say that we're altruistic and we want to help others, but why don't we? So it's a really interesting topic, I think. So perhaps have a look at it online. His name is, I'll write it in the chat now, Peter Singer, Effective Altruism. Let's have a look what other people. I think the difficult part comes when you want to help someone, but they are aware you're helping them and then they feel weak. That's a really good point, actually. Johanna, do you have anything to say to that?
To be fair, like, I think they still appreciate your act, and we shouldn't feel like, often it's also something based on our perception, but that we feel we make them kind of like perceive that they are in need, or that they seek, that we kind of like put them in the position to feel weak. And I think often it's not the case, and they actually really appreciate your support in any way. So I believe there's more kind of like positive benefit in supporting others, and in the end they will really kind of like
they'll be grateful for it, won't they?
Yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah.
All right, so I hope that was we tried to make that a little bit thought-provoking. If you have any other ideas while we go, please put them in the chat function or submit your Q&A. But we're going to move on to now how altruism can impact our well-being, and I'll hand over to you, Johanna, for this one.
Yeah, brilliant, thanks. So, I mean, we touched on a few things like why altruism can be great and can help us, and helping other people and engaging in these kind of activities of like pro-social behavior has just a lot of advantages for us. For example, it can improve our social relationships. It can give our lives like new purpose, for example, or show us, like other perspectives on our own like problems, for example, and improve the chances of others helping us as well, and helping, for example, our own relatives as well. So this is the theory which we learned about before, and make us more attractive to the opposing sex sometimes as well, and helping others may even kind of produce a sense of delight, like when eating a really good food, for example, which can make us really addictive, to be honest. And yeah, what are simple ways actually to act altruistically? So well, you could, for example, start by volunteering in your local community, or tell a colleague that you're happy to support them with their project, for example, at work. And make it a habit, for example, to support a person whenever there's a chance or opportunity, when there's something coming up in the supermarket, for example. So there is an easy and gratifying, this can be an easy and really gratifying exercise if we implement that in our daily life. So whether you help by holding the lift, for example, buying groceries for your elderly neighbor who's in the risk group, or pitching in to help a loved one, really notice how this makes you feel. And I believe it makes you feel really good, actually. Visualizing, for example, helping someone for a few minutes in the morning may help to do more act of kindness during the day. So I would like to ask you to close your eyes and visualize yourself giving a generous smile to a person in your life you love most. Now open your eyes. How do you feel? Imagine that person really smiling back to you and laughing with you. And next you could close your eyes again and visualize yourself giving a generous smile to someone who's just an acquaintance, for example, and feel the same response and laughter again. Finally, you could close your eyes and visualize yourself giving a generous smile to someone who you think is really in need of help, and really feel again this smiling and the laughter again. Then imagine how you can help that person, and go out and do it, like not now obviously, but maybe later today. Altruism can positively affect our mental well-being and our well-being in general. So for example, it may help to build resilience to stress. The act of giving triggers those positive feelings that may help us to forget, for example, what is worrying us, and increase our well-being and life satisfaction in general. So helping someone will not only make you feel better, but it also builds better relationship with a person, or as they will not forget, for example, that you supported them. This is what I meant before, like they will really appreciate it, and at some point they might come back and support you as well. So this may not only increase the quality of the direct relationship with the person you help, for example, but it goes beyond that, so further into the community, because it's kind of like contagion activity, supporting someone, as Emily mentioned before, with the challenges in the internet. It can be like it spreads through the community and kind of gets a community behavior. And when you do something nice for someone, you often enable them to do nice things for others, and so it grows. So this is a nice thought to think about it. Your children and your friends may see you as a good example, and just behave more altruistic themselves, because they saw how great it is and how rewarding it might feel for you. So research has shown that if you feel poor, that if you feel poor and you give to charity, for example, in the end you feel like you have more money. So this is really interesting. And if you feel like you don't have time and volunteer, you feel that you have actually more time in the end. And if you spend, for example, £5 on a present for someone, it makes you measurably happier than if you just buy yourself something with those £5, like a Starbucks coffee, for example. So basically, whenever it is that you give others the feeling, they feel richer for it. So this is what Peter Singer means when we talk about like effective altruism, as Emily mentioned before. You don't have to be rich or have all the time in the world to make a difference. You really just need to be more mindful and considerate about that, if that makes sense.
We've got one question, just wanting us to expand a bit on, so we talked about it potentially making us more attractive to the opposite sex, and Sophie's asked, can you expand on the reasoning behind this at all? It's not that clear as to why that is, but it's something, if you think about being overly altruistic or very generous and someone who's very selfless, you're more likely to attract people that are similar or that hold similar values to you than if you were completely selfish. And if you're thinking about others and putting others' needs ahead of your own sometimes, that can be a really endearing quality. And I don't know why, but I think it's also because it's part of all of us. And so if you feel like you've got some sort of similarity there with someone, it automatically makes you feel more attracted to them. But we might also do things that make us look good because we think that it will make us more attractive. And, you know, some people might not be like that, but I do think that there is a clear link there as well. And it can help us build those relationships further. What else have we got? Some people say that being altruistic is because we have a lack of self-esteem. So we do it for ourselves, so it can be fake. What are your thoughts on this? Johanna, what do you think?
To be fair, I would need to think about that question. If you have something in mind right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think that sometimes if we are feeling, I mean, we know that altruism and helping behaviours can have a really positive effect on the way we feel about ourselves and our self-esteem and our mood. So if we feel like we're doing good, it almost gives us a sense of meaning and a sense of purpose and giving back. And that's something that can be challenged if you have poor mental health. So it's not necessarily that it's fake. I suppose you might be trying to seek that feeling that you get when you are helping others. But this is why we were kind of talking about some of the different theories, because there's different approaches to it. And I think for some people, it will be selfish, such as, for example, improving your social status. But for others, it is completely selfless. So if we take Melinda and Bill Gates as a clear example of that, you know, they are a really good example of effective altruism. They do a lot of good, but they do it in an effective and smart way, in an economic way, don't they? So they always look for the best way to help the most people. And, you know, yes, they are very, very wealthy, but you don't have to be in that position to be able to be effectively altruistic and help people, to both help yourself and others. But yeah, I mean, I think it's a really interesting topic. So certainly one to maybe look more in depth at. And
I think the other question behind that is like, is one right or wrong? Like, you know, like is one side of altruism like supporting someone else and then expecting something back? Is it worse than just helping, for example, your family member and don't expecting anything back? So I think it's about like finding a balance in the moment and what feels right for you in this moment, and not about like true or fake altruism in general, which I think makes sense in that perspective.
Yeah. All right, let's move on. So we're going to now explore too much or too little. So if we think about altruism and self-interest, they can be thought of as very opposite ends of the spectrum. There will be a small number of extremely selfish people and a small number of extremely selfless people, with the majority of us sitting somewhere in the middle. At one end of the extreme, people who behave selfishly experience low levels of guilt and empathy, are very one extreme. And these people might take advantage of others. So these are the kind of people that might fit the criteria for what's called antisocial personality disorder. And this is characterized by repeated lying, impulsivity, aggression, and manipulation. And it's very complex, the cause of antisocial personality disorder, and it does include genetic factors and also early environmental conditions. But on the other hand, over-empathizing and helping can actually be obstructive, ineffective, and sometimes destructive as well to yourself. So behaviours associated with what's called pathological altruism can include denying your own needs, focusing on others to the detriment of those needs, and finding it hard to say no to other people. So the causes of pathological altruism aren't entirely known, but are likely a combination of genes, of upbringing and environment. So for example, a child placed in a caring role at a young age might become hypersensitive to empathy. These extremes of kind of pro-social and antisocial behaviour can really damage your mental health. So people with traits associated with being antisocial often become socially excluded, fail to form meaningful relationships. They also have increased chances of developing anxiety disorders, depression, or even taking their own life. But the mental health consequences of being overly altruistic might include things like workplace burnout or caregiver burnout, feelings of guilt or depression, and even eating disorders if it gets to the point where you are just denying your own basic needs. So when can altruism actually lead to burnout? Well, first of all, burnout is is full emotional, physical, and mental exhaustion. We talk about burnout a lot in a workplace context, but it's not just limited to the workplace, it's limited to all aspects of life. It's that emotional, physical, and mental exhaustion. So for the most part, altruistic behaviours do have a positive impact on our mental well-being, far superior to the negative ones. But there are instances where altruistic behaviour can lead to emotional, physical, and mental exhaustion or burnout, which might be impacting us now maybe more than normal, especially if we've assumed the role of a caregiver, for example, on top of other responsibilities. And if you don't have support, this can lead to severe stress. So there is also such a thing as parental burnout, which might also be more likely to occur during this period of time, especially if you are balancing full-time care for your children and also work, and maybe you don't have as much support. We are naturally inclined to do whatever we can for these people because they are our family, first and foremost. And this can be incredibly rewarding, but caregiver stress and burnout is a really common risk factor to mental health. People might also experience feelings of guilt or hopelessness. For example, if that person isn't showing any improvement, or you might feel bad for taking time away from them. But if you're constantly putting the needs of others above your own, it can cause you to neglect things like that are actually good for your physical and mental well-being, such as eating adequately, sleeping enough, exercising, and spending time with family and friends. So on the screen, you'll see some common examples. We've got the caregiver stress and parental burnout. We've also got one there called compassion fatigue. This is quite common in healthcare workers particularly, and it is essentially if you go through a period of burnout after overly caring for someone and declining your own needs, it can lead to what's called compassion fatigue, which is essentially where you lose the ability to have compassion for people again in that same scenario because it's led to a burnout state. So the reason why we're putting it on there is just to kind of be clear that while it's really, really good and helpful to help others, you have to also strike a balance, because if you don't, then you can have these negative impacts, lead to burnout, and also it might impact your ability to be compassionate later on down the track. I'm just going to have a look at the chat function now. Narcissists fit into this conversation too, I think. Perceived or implied altruism, but only because it reflects well on them and it and it can be used against the person who they'd helped. Yes, I agree with that. Parental burnout, yep, someone has said. It's all well and good using these methods, but to be honest, when I see people using these methods, it's for acceptance and gain. Okay, yeah, that's an interesting point. I think it really depends, and it's an individual thing. And I think it's about trying to build your own self-awareness and really question, your motives for doing things. And as long as it makes you feel good as well, then it is going to have a positive impact. So Johanna, we'll move on now to your slide, which is about how to find the right balance.
Which is so important, yes. So the question is now how to find really the right balance between, getting burned out, for example, and feeling well about, helping someone else. And we have to be mindful about our own needs and boundaries and our own limits, and supporting, for example, a family member 24/7 as well. As we feel guilty to involve, like, for example, support, like a nurse or a care home, while missing out our own needs can really affect our well-being negatively. And often we feel guilty because we think we prioritize, for example, our own needs over someone else's needs. And just admitting that we need some time to care for ourselves can feel like we are rejecting others in a way and being uncompassionate maybe about them in the moment of or in their needs. So in reality, however, like maintaining a healthy balance helps us to nurture our compassion actually for others. And here's some like ideas how you can overcome your guilt or your feeling of guilt, for example. So really reminding yourself that self-care is so important. We can't help others if we burn out, for example. Know your limits, like what is good for you and what isn't, like where's the threshold for yourself. Practice self-awareness and self-monitoring for that. So really check in with yourself and check in, how does that feel for you? Was that good? Was that exhausting? Was that something you can't do often? Or is that something, you really enjoyed, for example? And building this support system might really help as well. So you could really use reminders to tell yourself that it's important to take care of yourself. And if you don't, then eventually, as I said before, you will burn out, and that will be bad for both, for you as well as for the other person, because you can't help them if you, for example, completely exhausted and actually, on your limit. Also remember that that we can help others only to a specific limit. So if you feel like there's a threshold, like only so much we can do, and then we need, for example, support from a nurse or from external caretakers. There's only a limit what we can do, for example, for our family member. We need to be aware of that and don't feel guilty about it. There's really, it's completely okay to have this limit and let others know, okay, we need to seek support, for example. So when does helping others become a burden, and when does it feel actually rewarding, or how does it feel for us generally? So really get to know your limits and find the balance between feeling well and emotionally exhausted. So practicing self-awareness, self-monitoring, as I mentioned before, to recognize changes in behavior like work and well-being is a key to prevent those like compassion fatigue and burnout, which Emily explained before. So also like building a support system can be very important. And if someone needs a lot of care, it's really the best to do it with external support or with someone, like for example in your family. If you have no family or friends who can support you, really don't be shy about getting care from social services if necessary. You will not be letting the person down, not at all. And in fact, you will make sure that they're better cared for, as you will be just like feeling better or more rested. And you have more time, for example, doing something they enjoy together. So playing a game with them, except like when you're so exhausted from taking care that there's no spare time for you to enjoy anything anymore, like take pleasure in it with them together. So we need to take care of ourselves to really be compassionate for others in the long term.
Yeah.
So this is really important. Yeah.
I agree. And I think it's also about being realistic.
Yeah.
So linking back to that idea of effective altruism, be realistic with yourself. And I think sometimes we really want to do good and we really want to help people. And I've seen quite a few comments in the chat about people that have especially been helping family members. It can be really, really easy to feel guilty for thinking of yourself. But it is so important, because in the long term, like you were saying, if you don't look after yourself, then you're not going to be able to look after them, and you will start to burn out. So it's about finding that balance. And I know that sometimes situations are not that permitting, and you do have to support people as much as possible, but making sure that you put in some time for self-care, and whether that's through sort of stress management techniques. The app that we have, the Thrive app, has lots of different stress busting activities in there, and it can really help you to learn mindfulness as well, which is it's really good for improving your self-awareness. And when we were talking about checking in with yourself and self-monitoring, that can really build on that skill. And it doesn't have to take long out of your day, but making sure that you do take time to look out for yourself as well is going to have a longer term impact and benefit for people.
Yeah, and there's like self-awareness and self-monitoring strategies can be so helpful in that, like sometimes we just prevent all the feelings, like we can't think about like taking care of ourselves, but actually like when we set a step back and feel a bit more inside in ourselves, like we realize actually this is our limit, this is only so much we can do. And that's again like reminding ourselves that it's completely okay, and that it's actually important to take care of ourselves, and that we need to take care of ourselves to feel like, or be compassionate and support others. Because we can only do that to a specific limit. I mean, maybe short time works, but in the long term, it won't, like you will burn out. And this is the thing about like taking care of ourselves, to be able to really be compassionate about others.
Yeah.
So we come to the end. To give you a short recap on what we covered today, we covered a lot actually. So altruism means selflessly giving to others without concern for yourself, and there are various theories which Emily mentioned which explain the act of altruism. And we clearly have more than one impulse to act altruistic, so we learned that. And for example, we take care of relatives to guarantee their well-being or their survival. There's reciprocal altruism, so if someone does something for us, most of us would feel a bit of obligated to do something in return, and that is stronger than the feeling that than feeling like someone owns you something. But as both situations exist. And the urge to improve, for example, our status, or our compassion to, or empathy to others, or because we learned to act altruistically due to, for example, our parents being very involved in volunteering, for example. So pro-social behavior improves our well-being and improves our relationships to others, sets examples in our community, which is great, and gives us sometimes a sense of purpose as well. And we also elaborated a bit on the differentiation between altruism and self-interest, and when acting altruistic may lead to burnout and compassion fatigue. So for being able to, this is really a key message, for being able to support others, we need to take care of ourselves too. And practicing self-awareness and connecting to others might help to detect your own limits, checking in with your family and friends, and finding the right balance for yourself. is highly relevant to be compassionate and kind and altruistic to others.